Before we continue with our story, we'd love to know where in the world you are tuning in from today. Let us know in the comments below. It's wonderful to see how far our stories travel. Leo was a man built of salvaged parts. His hands, calloused and strong from years of hanging drywall and framing houses, were the same hands that once sketched the elegant lines of skyscrapers. His heart, a patched-up vessel heavy with the memory of his late wife, still beat with a fierce and gentle love for his 7-year-old daughter, Mia. They lived in a small apartment that always seemed to smell faintly of sawdust and Mia's bubblegum shampoo, a world away from the glass and steel dreams he had once chased. The grief was a constant companion, a quiet weight in his chest that reminded him of the life he'd lost, the architectural firm he and his wife had built together, the future that had crumbled to dust along with the foundation of a building in a tragedy that had taken her from him. Now, he was a construction worker, an honest job that paid the bills, just barely. His new dream was a simpler one, Mia's smile, her laughter, the surety that she would always have a roof over her head and a father who adored her. She was his moral compass, his North Star in a sky that had long gone dark. One crisp autumn afternoon, the park was a symphony of gold and red leaves. Mia was chasing squirrels with the unburdened joy only a child possesses, while Leo watched from a bench, a tired but fond smile on his face. It was then that he saw her. A woman in a manual wheelchair, her face a portrait of quiet frustration. A leather-bound sketchbook had slipped from her lap, falling open on the damp grass just out of her reach. She strained, her fingers stretching, her brow furrowed in a silent battle against her own body. As she struggled, a group of young men, their laughter loud and arrogant, walked by. One of them, with a cruel smirk and expensive shoes, deliberately kicked the sketchbook. It skidded across the grass, landing near a muddy puddle. The man, whom Leo would later come to know as Marcus, sneered, "Need a hand?" "Oh, wait." His friends roared with laughter, a harsh, grating sound that violated the peace of the afternoon. A fire, hot and righteous, ignited in Leo's chest. It was the kind of casual cruelty he could not abide, the punching down on someone already in a vulnerable position. He stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He walked over to the group, his gaze steady and calm. "Pick it up," he said, his voice low and even. Marcus turned, looking Leo up and down, taking in his work boots and worn-out jeans. He laughed, a short, barking sound. "And who are you? The park police? Get lost, construction boy." Leo didn't flinch. He simply held Marcus's gaze. "I'm the man telling you to pick up her book. Now." There was something in Leo's stillness, a sense of deep, unshakable integrity, that made Marcus falter. The smirk wavered. After a tense moment, Marcus scoffed, muttered something under his breath to his friends, and they moved on, leaving the book where it lay. Leo's act of defiance cost him nothing but a moment of his time, yet it felt like a stand for everything he believed in. He knelt down, his knees protesting, and carefully picked up the sketchbook, wiping a smudge of dirt from its cover. He turned to the woman, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Her eyes were the color of a stormy sea, vast and deep and holding a sorrow that he recognized, for it mirrored his own. Her name, he would learn, was Elena. As Leo handed the sketchbook back to Elena, their fingers brushed for a fleeting second. It was a spark of warmth against the autumn chill, a silent acknowledgement that passed between two people who understood what it meant to carry a heavy load. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice as fragile as a bird's wing. Her gaze dropped to the open page, a detailed, breathtakingly intricate drawing of a bridge, its arches soaring with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. Leo, the architect buried deep inside the construction worker, felt a jolt of recognition. This was not the work of a hobbyist. This was the work of a visionary. "This is incredible," he breathed, his voice filled with genuine awe. "You have a gift." A faint blush colored her cheeks, the first sign of life he'd seen on her pale face. "It's just something I do," she murmured, closing the book as if to hide a part of herself. Just then, Mia, her squirrel-chasing adventure concluded, ran over. She stopped beside Elena's wheelchair, her head tilted with the unabashed curiosity of a child. "Hi," she said brightly. "Your drawings are pretty. My daddy used to make pretty drawings of buildings, but his are all in a box now." Leo felt a familiar pang. Mia, in her innocence, had just unearthed a piece of his own buried past. He put a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Mia, this is..." He looked at Elena, realizing he didn't know her name. "I'm Elena," she supplied, a small, tentative smile gracing her lips as she looked at Mia. The smile didn't quite reach her stormy eyes, but it was a start. "It's nice to meet you, Mia." The interaction was effortless, a bridge built by a 7-year-old's simple honesty. The tension that had clung to Elena after the encounter with Marcus began to dissipate, replaced by a shy warmth. Leo saw the way the harsh lines of the world seemed to soften around her when she looked at his daughter. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a chill returned to the air. "We should get going," Leo said. He looked at Elena, at the solitude that seemed to be her cloak. "Do you live far from here? Can I walk with you, make sure you get home safely?" He expected her to refuse, to retreat back into her shell. But after a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "I'm just a few blocks away." "I would appreciate that." Their journey was mostly silent, the only sounds the rhythmic squeak of her wheels on the pavement and Mia's occasional chatter about her day. Leo learned that Elena lived in a small, ground-floor apartment in a modest building. It was clean and accessible, but it felt temporary. Empty. He helped her up the small ramp to her door, his hand hovering near her back, unsure of the etiquette of helping, not wanting to overstep. She unlocked her door and turned to him. "Thank you again, Leo," she said, using his name for the first time. Most people, they either stare or they look away. You did neither. You just saw a person. Her words landed squarely in the center of his chest. To be seen. It was a simple thing, a powerful thing. He knew what it was to feel invisible, to be defined by a job or a loss. In that moment, he saw that her wheelchair was the least interesting thing about her. He saw the artist, the survivor, the woman with the stormy sea eyes that held entire oceans of untold stories. "Anytime, Elena," he said, and he meant it. As he and Mia walked home, hand in hand, a strange feeling settled over him. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was something quieter. It was hope, faint and flickering, like the first star appearing in the twilight sky. The encounter in the park was not an ending, but a beginning. It became the first stitch in a tapestry that would slowly, carefully, weave their lives together. A few days later, while walking home from the grocery store, Leo found himself deliberately taking the route that passed Elena's street. He told himself it was just a coincidence, but the bag of groceries, containing a small bouquet of daisies he'd bought on impulse, told a different story. He saw her through her front window, sitting in her chair, staring at a blank page in her sketchbook with a look of profound emptiness. Without a second thought, he walked up her ramp and knocked on the door. When she opened it, surprise flickered in her eyes, quickly followed by a guarded apprehension. He held out the flowers. "I was just passing by," he said, feeling suddenly foolish. "Mia said she likes daisies. I thought, maybe you would too." Elena stared at the simple, cheerful flowers for a long moment. A tear welled in her eye, catching the afternoon light like a tiny prism. She took them, her fingers trembling slightly. "No one has brought me flowers in a very long time," she said softly. She invited him in, and he and Mia stepped into her world. The apartment was sparse, functional, but her art was everywhere. Canvases leaned against the walls, filled with stark, beautiful cityscapes and designs that spoke of both strength and fragility. It was a home that was waiting for life to be breathed into it. That visit became the first of many. Leo and Mia became a regular fixture in Elena's quiet life. They would bring groceries, or a hot meal Leo had cooked. Mia would sit on the floor beside Elena's wheelchair, coloring in her own books while Elena sketched, the two of them in a comfortable, creative silence. Leo would fix a leaky faucet or a sticky window, using his practical skills to make her life just a little bit easier. In these quiet moments, the walls they had both built around their hearts began to crumble, brick by painful brick. Leo found himself talking about his wife, Sarah. He spoke of her laugh, of their shared dream, of the suffocating guilt he carried, a guilt that told him he should have been there, that he could have done something to prevent the accident. Elena listened, her gaze never wavering. She didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. She simply offered him the gift of her presence, a safe harbor where he could finally speak his grief aloud. In return, Elena began to share slivers of her own story. She spoke of a life before the wheelchair, a life filled with dance and running and a freedom she now missed like a phantom limb. She spoke of the accident in vague, shadowed terms. It was a dark time, she'd say, a shudder falling over her expressive eyes. A betrayal I'm still trying to understand. She never named names, never offered details, but Leo could feel the deep, unhealed wound at the core of her being. He didn't push. He knew that some doors can only be opened from the inside. He was simply content to sit on the other side and wait, letting her know she wasn't alone. He was beginning to realize that he wasn't just helping her, she was healing him, too. Her resilience in the face of her daily struggles put his own self-pity into perspective. Her passion for her art reignited a flicker of his own long-dormant creativity. He was seeing the world not just as a series of construction jobs, but as a landscape of lines, forms, and possibilities again. He was starting to feel less like salvaged parts and more like a man being carefully put back together. One evening, as rain drummed a gentle rhythm against the windowpane, Leo was looking through Elena's main sketchbook. He turned a page and stopped. It was a series of conceptual drawings for a community center. But this wasn't just any building, it was designed with a profound empathy for its users. There were wide, sweeping ramps that were not just functional but beautiful, integrated into the design like flowing ribbons. There were sensory gardens for the visually impaired, sound-dampened quiet rooms for those with sensory processing disorders, and studio spaces with adjustable height tables. It was a masterpiece of inclusive design, a place where everyone, regardless of physical ability, would feel not just accommodated but welcomed. Elena, Leo said, his voice thick with emotion. This is genius. It's more than a building, it's a statement. It's about dignity. Elena looked over, her expression soft. It's just a dream. A world I wish existed. It was then that the dam inside Leo finally broke. He confessed everything. Not just that he was a construction worker, but that he had been an architect. He told her about Davis and Son Architects, the firm he'd inherited from his father, and how he and Sarah had rebranded it to Davis and Davis, a partnership of love and design. He described the passion they shared, the way they could finish each other's sentences, both in conversation and on a blooper, and he told her about the collapse, the faulty soil report from a subcontractor he had trusted, the corner he hadn't cut but had failed to double-check, and the crushing weight of responsibility that had made it impossible for him to ever look at a blueprint again without seeing his wife's face. He had packed away his drafting table, his awards, his entire identity, and had chosen the physical certainty of construction, a world where he could build with his hands and not have to dream. Elena listened, her hand finding his. It wasn't your fault, Leo, she said, her voice firm but gentle. Sometimes, the foundations we build on are faulty, and it's not the fault of the architect. It's the fault of the ground beneath. Her words were a key, unlocking a room in his heart that had been sealed shut for years. Her metaphor was so precise, so understanding, it was as if she could see the architecture of his own soul. From that night on, a new dimension was added to their relationship. They were no longer just a lonely man and a lonely woman finding solace in each other's company. They became collaborators. They spread the plans for her community center out on her dining table. Leo, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, picked up a pencil. He pointed out a structural possibility, suggested a different material for a load-bearing wall, his old instincts kicking in. Elena, in turn, challenged his pragmatism with her artistic vision. They worked for hours, a dance of creativity and intellect. They were designing a hypothetical building, but in reality, they were drafting the blueprint for a shared future. They were taking the broken pieces of their respective pasts and, together, were designing something new, something beautiful, something whole. Mia would watch them, a knowing smile on her face, as if she understood that they weren't just drawing a building, they were drawing a home. The laughter in Elena's apartment grew more frequent. The light in her eyes began to outshine the sorrow. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Leo felt the stirrings of a joy that was not just a memory, but a promise. As the weeks turned into a month, the bond between Leo, Mia, and Elena solidified into the comforting shape of a family. They had their routines. Tuesday was pasta night, Friday was for pizza and a movie, and Sundays were spent back at the park, only now it was a place of happy memories, not painful ones. The community center design, which they had nicknamed the Harmony Project, was nearly complete, a sprawling testament to their shared vision, spread across dozens of sheets of paper that now covered Elena's living room walls. But as their small world grew brighter, a shadow from Elena's past began to lengthen. One evening, as Leo was helping her put away the drawings, she grew quiet, her expression clouded with an anxiety he hadn't seen in weeks. "What is it?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the outline of a window on one of the blueprints. "I have a sister," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "A twin. Her name is Sophia." Leo was surprised. In all their conversations, she had never mentioned a twin. "You've never talked about her?" Elena let out a long, shaky breath. "We're not close. We haven't been for a long time. She's different from me. She was always the one who fit in, the popular one, the one our parents doted on. The lucky one." There was a bitterness in her tone that was sharp and painful. "She calls sometimes. It's never good." She looked up at him, her stormy eyes pleading. "Leo, if you ever meet her. If she ever tells you things about me, will you promise me something? Promise you'll remember the person you know, not the person she describes. Promise you'll trust me." The intensity of her request sent a chill down his spine. It was more than a simple plea, it felt like a desperate premonition. "Of course, Elena. I would never let anyone change my mind about you. You're the kindest, strongest person I know." He meant every word, and she seemed to find some comfort in his conviction. A few days later, the other shoe dropped. Elena received a call that left her pale and trembling. She was sitting by the window, the phone pressed to her ear, and Leo could only hear her side of the conversation, short, clipped answers. "No. I don't know. I'll have to think about it." When she hung up, tears were streaming down her face. He rushed to her side, kneeling beside her chair. "Elena, what happened? Who was that?" "It was the pharmacy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "The new medication my doctor prescribed, the one that's supposed to help with the nerve pain, my insurance won't cover it. It's thousands of dollars a month." The number was a punch to the gut. It was an impossible sum, a mountain they couldn't climb. Leo looked at her face, etched with pain and despair, and he felt a fierce, protective anger. He saw the flicker of hope in her eyes begin to dim, and he knew, with every fiber of his being, that he could not let it go out. This woman, who had helped him find his way back to himself, was suffering, and the world was telling her she was not worth the cost of a life without pain. He wouldn't accept it. That night, after he put Mia to bed, he made a phone call to his foreman. "Hey, Frank," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart. "You know that high-rise job downtown? The one with all the overtime, the weekend work? Is there still an opening? I'll take it." The decision to take the high-rise job was a descent into a world of grinding exhaustion. The work was grueling and perilous, demanding a level of physical exertion that left Leo's body aching and bruised. He left his apartment before the sun rose, a ghost kissing his sleeping daughter's forehead, and returned long after she was in bed, covered in a film of dust and fatigue. He saw Mia only in brief, bleary-eyed snatches on the weekends he wasn't working. He was sacrificing his time with his daughter, the most precious commodity he had, and it tore at his conscience. But then he would think of Elena, of the grimace of pain she tried so hard to hide, and he would push through another day. He funneled every extra dollar he earned into a separate account, a secret fund for her medication. It was a slow, arduous process, but the number was climbing. He was building her a bridge to a life with less pain, $1, one exhausting hour at a time. Elena noticed the change in him immediately. She saw the new lines of fatigue etched around his eyes, the way he sometimes winced when he lifted something, the deep weariness that clung to him like a second skin. "Leo, you're working too much," she said one evening, her voice laced with concern. He had stopped by on his way home from the site, too tired to even shower first. "You look exhausted." He tried to brush it off. "It's just a big project. Lots of overtime." But she saw through the lie. She looked at him with those all-seeing eyes, and he felt the truth rise to the surface. He confessed, telling her about the extra job, about the fund he was building for her medication. Her reaction wasn't what he expected. There was no relief, no gratitude. Instead, her face crumpled in anguish. "No, Leo. You can't," she cried, her hands gripping the wheels of her chair. "You can't destroy yourself for me. Your health, your time with Mia, it's too much. It's not worth it." "You are worth it," he said, his voice raw with emotion. He took her hand, his calloused palm enveloping her slender fingers. "You are worth it, Elena. You taught me how to feel again. You gave me back a part of myself I thought was gone forever. Letting you be in pain when I can do something about it? That's what's not worth it." In that moment, something shifted in her. Seeing the depth of his sacrifice, the unconditional nature of his love, seemed to forge a new resolve within her. The fear that had held her captive for so long was finally eclipsed by a fierce determination. She wiped her tears, her jaw set. "There's another way," she said, her voice stronger now. "I've been avoiding it for years. I've been afraid. But I'm not afraid anymore. Not with you by my side." She explained that she had been receiving letters from a lawyer for months, letters she had been ignoring. Her parents, wealthy but emotionally distant, had passed away a year ago. They had left behind a substantial inheritance, a massive estate. "It's complicated," she said. "There are stipulations. My sister, Sophia, she's the executor. She's been trying to get me to sign papers, to cede control, claiming I'm not competent. She's been using the money as a weapon." It was a story of manipulation and control, and Leo's heart ached for her. "I have to face her," Elena declared, her eyes burning with a new fire. "I have to go to the house, the one we grew up in. The lawyer is settling the estate next week. I need to be there. But I can't do it alone." She looked at him, her vulnerability and her strength warring in her gaze. "Will you come with me, Leo? Will you and Mia come with me?" "We'll be right there with you," he said without a moment's hesitation. "Always." The day of the meeting arrived cloaked in a gray, ominous sky. The drive to the estate was a journey into a different world, a world of manicured lawns, sprawling mansions, and old money. Leo's sturdy work truck felt out of place as they passed through imposing iron gates and drove up a long, winding driveway. The house loomed at the end of it, a cold, imposing structure of stone and glass that looked more like a museum than a home. It was beautiful, but it had no soul. Leo could see why Elena's art was so full of stark lines. She had grown up in a world of them. Mia, sitting in the back seat, seemed to sense the tension. She was uncharacteristically quiet, her small hand clutching a worn teddy bear. Elena was a statue of controlled anxiety in the passenger seat. Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. "Are you okay?" Leo asked, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She took a deep, shaky breath. "I just keep telling myself, this is the last time. After today, I'll be free." He nodded, his own heart pounding in his chest. He felt like a soldier going into battle for her. He parked the truck in front of the massive, carved oak doors. Taking a portable ramp from the trunk, he set it up over the 3 stone steps leading to the entrance. He helped Elena out of the truck and into her wheelchair, his movements gentle and practiced. He then went to the back door to get Mia. "Stay close to me, sweetie," he said softly, and she nodded, her eyes wide as she took in the scale of the house. She slipped her tiny hand into his. Together, the 3 of them, the construction worker, the little girl, and the woman in the wheelchair, approached the fortress. Leo rang the doorbell, and the sound echoed in the unnerving silence. The door swung open. Standing in the entryway was a woman who was Elena's perfect mirror. She had the same dark hair, the same facial structure, the same stormy-colored eyes. But where Elena's eyes held oceans of sorrow and burgeoning hope, this woman's eyes were cold, flat, and hard as polished stone. Her mouth was curved into a smile that was all sharp edges and no warmth. And she was standing. She was wearing a sleek, expensive dress and high heels, her posture radiating an arrogant confidence. This was Sophia. "Elena," she said, her voice smooth as silk but laced with venom. "You came. And you brought company." Her eyes flicked over Leo and Mia with undisguised contempt, dismissing them as insignificant. And then, a man stepped out from behind her, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. It was Marcus. The cruel, sneering man from the park. His face registered a flicker of surprise, which quickly morphed into a look of smug superiority. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't just a family dispute, it was a conspiracy. The man who had humiliated Elena in public was intertwined with the sister who controlled her life. Leo felt a protective rage surge through him, but he kept his expression neutral, his hand tightening its grip on Mia's. Elena's face was ashen. She stared at Marcus, then at her sister, a look of profound betrayal dawning in her eyes. It was a trap. Sophia's gaze landed on Leo, a cruel, calculating light in her eyes. She looked him up and down, taking in his simple clothes, his work-worn hands. Then she smiled that sharp, cutting smile again. "So you're the one she's been telling me about," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The charity project." She took a step forward, her eyes locked on his. "Let me ask you something," she purred, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "Did she tell you I'm the one who can walk?" The question hung in the cavernous marble foyer like a poison dart, aimed directly at the heart of everything Leo had come to believe. Sophia's words were a calculated strike, designed to shatter his trust and isolate Elena in an instant. Marcus chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "She's quite the actress, isn't she? Always has been. The tragic, broken little bird. Pathetic." Sophia straightened up, her expression one of mock sympathy. "You have to understand," she said to Leo, completely ignoring her sister, "Elena has always been fragile. She craves attention. After the accident, when she realized the sympathy she could get, she just leaned into it. The doctors said she had a chance at recovery with intensive therapy, but she refused. Said it was too hard. It's easier to have people feel sorry for you, to have men like you wait on her hand and foot." She gestured around the cold, opulent hall. "Our parents' will is very specific. The bulk of the estate is to be used for the care of the sibling in greater need. She's been faking the extent of her condition, Leo. All of this," she gestured toward Elena's wheelchair, "is an elaborate ploy to get the entire inheritance. She's been playing you for a fool." Every word was a lie, polished and smooth and designed to sound like a painful truth. Leo looked from Sophia's hard, triumphant face to Marcus's smug grin. He saw the trap they had laid, the narrative they had carefully constructed. For a terrifying second, a sliver of doubt tried to wedge its way into his mind. He was a simple man, a construction worker. These were wealthy, sophisticated people. What if they were right? What if he had been naive? Then he looked at Elena. Her face had crumpled, tears of shock and betrayal streaming silently down her cheeks. She looked broken, utterly defeated by the cruelty of her own twin sister. But then her eyes met his. And in her gaze, he didn't see deceit. He saw the same woman who had listened to his grief, the woman who had reignited his passion, the woman whose strength had inspired him for weeks. He saw the artist, the dreamer, the survivor. He saw Elena. And his doubt vanished, replaced by an unshakable certainty. He remembered her plea in the apartment, "Promise you'll trust me." He stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her wheelchair, a silent protector. He looked directly at Sophia. "No," he said, his voice calm and steady. "She didn't tell me you're the one who can walk. She told me you were her sister." The simplicity of his statement, his unwavering faith, was like a splash of cold water. It wasn't the reaction Sophia had expected. At that moment, little Mia, who had been silent and wide-eyed, let go of Leo's hand. She walked over to Elena's wheelchair and, without a word, climbed into her lap, wrapping her small arms around Elena's neck. She buried her face in Elena's shoulder, a simple, profound act of comfort and solidarity. That small gesture of pure-hearted love was the spark that reignited the fire in Elena. She hugged Mia back tightly, drawing strength from the child's embrace. She wiped her tears, not with shame, but with a newfound anger. The broken bird was gone. In her place was a phoenix, ready to rise from the ashes of her sister's lies. "You're wrong, Sophia," Elena said, her voice no longer trembling, but ringing with a clear, cold fury that stunned her sister into silence. "You were always wrong about me. And now, everyone is going to hear the truth." Elena's voice, now steady and strong, cut through the oppressive atmosphere of the mansion. "The accident wasn't my fault," she began, her eyes locked on Marcus. "And it wasn't an accident." Sophia scoffed. "Oh, here we go. More dramatic stories." But Elena was not deterred. She looked at Leo, her gaze conveying a story of trauma she had been too afraid to share until now. "Marcus and I were dating. I thought I loved him, but he wasn't kind. He was controlling, and when he drank, he was cruel." Her eyes shifted to her sister. "You knew, Sophia. You saw the bruises he tried to explain away. You saw how I flinched when he moved too quickly. And you did nothing. You were jealous of the attention he gave me, even if it was the wrong kind." She took a breath, steeling herself to recount the night that had shattered her world. That night, he was drunk. He was furious about something, some perceived slight. He was driving like a maniac. You were in the back seat, Sophia. I begged him to slow down, but he just laughed. We argued, and I told him it was over. That's when he snapped. Tears welled in her eyes again, but these were tears of memory, not defeat. He turned to me, his face twisted with rage, and he screamed, "If I can't have you, no one can." And he yanked the steering wheel, aiming the car directly at a concrete barrier on the side of the road. The horror of the scene she painted filled the room. "The last thing I remember is the sound of you screaming, Sophia. And then, blackness." She looked at her twin, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "When I woke up in the hospital, my legs were gone. And you and Marcus had already crafted your story. You told the police I was driving. That I was the one who was hysterical and lost control. You did it to protect him from a DUI and a vehicular assault charge that would have sent him to prison for years. Why?" Leo asked softly, the question hanging in the air. Elena's gaze was filled with a lifetime of pain. Because she made a deal. She would lie for him, and in exchange, he would stay with her. And together, they would make sure I was declared incompetent, unable to manage my inheritance. You were never just jealous of me, Sophia. You were jealous of what you thought I had. So you took my reputation, you tried to take my future, and you took the use of my legs. All for him, she gestured to Marcus, and for this house. As Elena finished, Leo's mind, the architect's mind, was racing. He remembered something from a trade journal years ago. What kind of car was it? He asked suddenly. Marcus looked flustered. What does that matter? Just answer the question, Leo pressed. Sophia, trying to regain control, answered impatiently. It was a Vantage sedan. The 2018 model. Leo nodded slowly. The 2018 Vantage. I remember that car. There was a massive recall. The passenger side airbag deployment system was faulty. In a frontal collision like the one you described, it would deploy with such force it often caused secondary injuries. Broken ribs, facial fractures. But the driver's side was fine. He looked directly at Sophia. You were in the back seat, you said. Unharmed. And Marcus was in the driver's seat. Also unharmed. But Elena, in the passenger seat, her spine was severed. Funny how the only person who was catastrophically injured was the one sitting in the seat with the notoriously dangerous, faulty airbag. Sophia's face went white. Her carefully constructed lie had a fatal design flaw, and an unassuming construction worker had just exposed it. It was at that precise moment that the grand oak doors opened again. A distinguished-looking man in a suit, holding a briefcase, stepped inside. I apologize for my delay, he said. I am Mr. Harrison, the family's attorney. His eyes took in the scene, Sophia and Marcus, pale and cornered, Leo and Mia, standing as silent witnesses, and Elena, her face a mask of resolute fury. It seems I've arrived in the middle of something. You have, Elena said, her voice ringing with authority. You've arrived just in time to hear the truth. But you don't have to take my word for it. With a steady hand, she reached into the side pocket of her wheelchair and pulled out her phone. You see, Sophia, you have a bad habit of confessing when you think you have all the power. You've been calling me for weeks, trying to threaten me into signing away my rights. Last week, you got careless. She pressed a button on her phone. Sophia's voice, slick and cruel, filled the silent hall. Just sign the papers, Elena. It's for your own good. You're a cripple. You can't manage this kind of money. Let me and Marcus take care of everything. You know what happens when you defy me. Remember the car? I can make your life so much harder. Just do what you're told. The recording played on, an undeniable confession of blackmail, conspiracy, and malice. Sophia's face crumbled. The mask was gone. The game was over. The silence that followed the recording was absolute and damning. Sophia stood frozen, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The color had drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, sallow complexion. Marcus, the swagger and arrogance completely stripped from him, took an involuntary step away from her, as if her toxicity were suddenly radioactive. He was a coward, looking to save his own skin. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, listened to the entire recording with a deepening frown, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to undisguised disgust. When the recording ended, he slowly closed his eyes, took off his glasses, and polished them with a handkerchief, a deliberate gesture that seemed to mark the end of an era. Well, he said, his voice cold and precise. That certainly clarifies things. He looked at Sophia and Marcus, not as family friends, but as criminals. Blackmail, conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, not to mention the new information regarding the vehicular assault. This is a matter that extends far beyond the settlement of an estate. This is a matter for the police. Sophia let out a choked sob, a sound of self-pity, not remorse. No, please, she's lying, she manipulated the recording. But her protests were hollow, pathetic. The truth had been laid bare, and no lie was big enough to cover it. Mr. Harrison ignored her, turning his full attention to Elena. He saw her not as the fragile and incompetent woman Sophia had painted, but as a survivor of immense fortitude. "Elena," he said, his tone softening with respect, "according to your parents' will, in the event of malfeasance by the executor, full control of the estate and the family's charitable foundation passes to the other beneficiary. That's you. Everything, this house, the investments, the foundation, it is all yours, effective immediately." He then looked at Sophia and Marcus. "As for you two, I suggest you find your own legal counsel. You will need it. I will be contacting the authorities this afternoon. You are to vacate this property by the end of the day." The poetic justice was swift and absolute. Sophia, who had tried to steal everything from her sister, was left with nothing. Marcus, who had used his power to abuse and intimidate, was now facing the full force of the law he had so arrogantly flouted. As the reality of their ruin settled upon them, they crumbled. But Leo felt no joy in their destruction, only a profound sense of relief for Elena. He knelt beside her chair, and Mia, still in her lap, looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Elena's hand found his, her grip strong and sure. The storm in her eyes had finally passed, leaving behind a clear, calm sea. Later that week, Sophia and Marcus were arrested. The case became a local news story, a tale of greed and betrayal among the city's elite. But Leo, Mia, and Elena paid it no mind. They were busy with other, more important things. They were in Elena's small apartment, which now felt less like a temporary shelter and more like a true home. The walls were covered not with blueprints of a hypothetical building, but with the final drafts of a real one. Elena, now in full control of her family's vast resources, had made a decision. "I want to build it, Leo," she had said, her eyes shining with purpose. "The Harmony Project. I want to use the foundation's money to create a place that embodies everything we designed. A place of welcome, of dignity, of hope." She looked at him, her expression a mix of hope and nervousness. "But I can't do it alone. The foundation needs a lead architect. Someone with vision, with integrity, with heart. Someone who understands what it means to build things that last." Leo knew what she was asking. It was more than a job offer. It was an invitation to step back into the life he had abandoned, to reclaim the identity he had buried under years of grief and sawdust. He looked at Mia, who was beaming at him, and he looked at Elena, the woman who had seen the architect in him even when he could only see the broken man. "I would be honored," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. It was gratitude, it was love, it was the feeling of coming home. The days of the high-rise and the grinding exhaustion were over. The days of sketching dreams were about to begin. They were no longer just three lonely people who had found each other. They were a family, forged in kindness and tempered by fire. They were architects of their own second chance. A year later, the city skyline was graced by a new building. It didn't scrape the clouds or boast of corporate power. It was a structure of modest height but immense heart, a building that seemed to embrace the ground it stood on. Wide, sweeping ramps flowed like rivers of polished concrete, gardens bloomed with fragrant herbs and textured leaves, and vast windows bathed every corner in natural light. A simple, elegant sign near the entrance read, "The Harmony Center." The grand opening was a joyous affair. The sun was shining, a gentle breeze was blowing, and the air was filled with music and laughter. The center was already bustling with life. Children with disabilities played in the specially designed accessible playground, artists worked in the open-air studios, and elderly people sat in the sensory garden, their faces turned to the sun. It was a perfect realization of the dream that had been born on the pages of a sketchbook in a lonely apartment. Elena was at the center of it all. She sat in her state-of-the-art wheelchair, not as a symbol of limitation, but as a throne of leadership. She wore a vibrant blue dress that matched the newfound clarity in her eyes. The inheritance hadn't just given her financial freedom, it had given her a platform and a purpose. She was the president of the foundation, a respected philanthropist, and a fierce advocate for inclusive design. She had found that her voice was her strongest limb. By her side stood Leo. He was no longer the tired construction worker in dusty jeans. He wore a well-fitted suit, but his hands, though cleaner, still held the quiet strength of a man who knew how to build things. He was the lead architect of the Harmony Center, his name once again associated with visionary design. He had rediscovered his passion, not as a ghost of his past with Sarah, but as a living, breathing part of his future with Elena. He had finally forgiven himself, understanding that true strength wasn't in avoiding collapse, but in having the courage to rebuild. Standing between them, holding a giant pair of ceremonial scissors, was Mia. She was 8 years old now, her face bright with pride as she looked at the two people she loved most in the world. She was the moral compass who had pointed them toward each other, the catalyst for their found family. With a determined snip, she cut the red ribbon, and the crowd erupted in applause. Later, as the celebration swirled around them, Leo, Elena, and Mia found a quiet moment on a bench overlooking the gardens they had designed together. Mia rested her head on Elena's lap, sleepy from the excitement, and Elena gently stroked her hair. Leo wrapped an arm around Elena's shoulders, pulling her close. "Look what we built," he said softly, his gaze sweeping over the vibrant scene. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "No, Leo," she corrected gently. "Look what love built." He looked down at her, at the incredible woman who had faced down betrayal and had chosen to build a legacy of kindness instead of a fortress of bitterness. Her wheelchair was a part of her, yes, but it was just that, a part. It did not define her. Her strength, her heart, her brilliant mind, that was who she was. He had met her as a wounded soul in a park, and now she was the soul of a whole community. He, the virtuous underdog who had performed one small act of kindness, had received a reward beyond any riches, a family, a purpose, and a love that had healed the deepest parts of him. The story of Leo and Elena reminds us of a profound and simple truth: what we build with our hands is temporary, but what we build with our hearts can last an eternity. Their journey teaches us that true strength is not the absence of scars, but the courage to show them, to allow others to help us heal, and to use our own healed wounds to then bring comfort to the world. It shows us that one small act of kindness, of choosing to see the person instead of their circumstances, can set in motion a chain of events that can transform lives, defeat cruelty, and build a future filled with hope. They prove that the most beautiful structures are not made of steel and glass, but of trust, resilience, and unconditional love. So we want to ask you, what did you feel when you saw Mia place her trust in Elena? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If this story lifted your soul, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Soul Lift Stories for more inspirational content. And if you know someone who needs to be reminded that their broken pieces can be used to create something beautiful, share this story with them. Remember, you have the power to be the Leo in someone else's life. Choose to see them. Choose kindness. And you might just help build a masterpiece.